before we start talking about responsible AI and what it takes to advance it, I felt it would be useful to set the stage a little bit, right? And start with where are we in actual development of this technology? How did we get here? And in particular, for people who are not experts in this field, what would be, I think, very useful is to understand what is different about the current generation of AI models compared to the previous state of the art.
Sure. First of all, thanks for hosting me, and it's a pleasure to be at the Qatar Economic Forum. Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of, as you said, thanks a lot for on the Palantir side. I think everyone knows it either on the controversial side or the whole stocks. So everyone's kind of checking the stocks on Palantir. But in terms of actually how we got here and how we can talk about large language models or generally artificial intelligence, I think the initiation of the whole conversation and idea came from very long ago, from when Turing actually in around 1947 mentioned we need machines to actually start learning. We need machines to learn. And from then, everything started, and even he himself actually started a test paper on it. And then the whole conversation moved on. And I would say when we talk about GPTs or LLMs, we're talking a branch of AIs in terms of their capabilities. And normally, artificial intelligence actually is known in either one category as capabilities or functionalities. And these type of categorization is mainly done by research. And they are known as either reactive, having a bit of limited memory, or being completely aware. And all of these type of either narrow AI, general AI, super AI, all of these has been in research for a long time. And then 2018, I would say, was the very start of GPT and OpenAI actually talking about GPT-1 and starting the whole conversation much more focused on usage of large language models. So I think we're talking about an evolution here. And even before GPT's machine learning on different image processing and different activities has been going on. And we know it from all the different sectors, from defense to actually research to cancer research. It's been going on for a long time. And I would say that changes, when you mentioned about what has changed in their capabilities, to directly address your question, I would say there are a lot of consideration mostly on their latent capabilities. And those are the main changes about GPTs or large language models, and not necessarily on their architecture, which I think we can discuss a bit later on it as well. But the changes has been majorly since 2022 and so on, which actually the ChatGPT actually became a very known product. And then after that, all the modifications that got applied to it. But mainly we're talking about actually how deep learning, natural language processing, and other aspects of artificial intelligence actually became known to, became used actually for these type of capabilities, for chat-related, or what we know as a combination of narrow and limited memory type AI. And I think building on that, then we can talk about much more like how these limited capabilities actually are now addressed. And I would basically pause. Maybe we can then discuss on it.
So I think, I will take two main points from what you said, which I think are very important. So first of all, machine learning and AI did not start with ChatGPT, and it's not going to end with ChatGPT either, right? So this is an evolutionary process, right? And a lot of people have been focusing on language models and chatbots in particular, but to your point, there are applications in many different industries which span the whole spectrum of different applications. So, Noor, maybe from your perspective as a VC, right, would you like to add something to this, right, from a point of view of what you think is different about the current point of development?
Sure. I'm happy to bring a different perspective. But before I do, I know we've all been sitting for a while. Can I see a show of hands? Who here has used any of the AIs out there? Okay, great. So we're not talking about something theoretical, and I think that's where I want to bring this. It's like the earlier panel was what can AI do? This panel is advancing responsible AI. I think the truth is that AI is here. We've used it, we've touched it, we've felt it. As an investor, we've invested in many companies. We've done 63 investments in the last 5 years. 40% of those companies are either using AI or consider themselves AI-led. And I'll give two brief examples. One is on the LLM side, the other is on different processing, right? So your general AI. So on the LLM side, one of our companies was a WebMD for the region. It was called Al-Tibbi, for those familiar with it. It then started building a telemedicine platform, because obviously if you're the biggest healthcare content provider as a WebMD with 3 million uniques a month, it's not that hard to figure out who's not feeling well and send them to a doctor on a telemedicine platform. Then they subsequently, since ChatGPT and all these LLMs started becoming a little bit more easy to grasp, built the largest LLM in Arabic for healthcare, which they've now integrated in Abu Dhabi with the government. And think about it, that is a use case that you're saying it's not theoretical, it's practical, it's in practice. Someone's not feeling well, they get onto their telemedicine platform and they're gonna interact with an AI that is gonna give them the first 80% of the journey perhaps in a very succinct and effective way. So back to where does responsibility sit? If you were, this panel is supposed to be about responsible AI, this is very much a good use case that is helpful. Now, do we have the problem of what if it's giving wrong advice? Who is ultimately responsible? Of course you have these challenges, but in a part of the world, and I do want to bring it back to context, in a part of the world where we have 1 doctor per 1,000 people, not 4 doctors per 1,000 people like in Europe or the US, yes, this is a very good first port of call. Because it's not the question of, do I get a doctor or use an AI? It can be a question of no doctor or AI for many people, or doctor 1 week from now when I'm really feeling unwell, versus an AI now that might help me when I'm feeling slightly unwell. So you're solving a fundamental issue, which is access to healthcare using AI. If they're wrong occasionally, is that a real problem? Yes, it's a real problem. Is it better than to say, then let's just not have this? Probably not, because how many people have you helped in the meantime? So it's a very delicate balance when it comes to responsibility. On the other side of the spectrum, another AI-led company that we invested in, goodness, 4 or 5 years ago, again, using ML for many years, and now coming to a point where they've integrated AI and become AI-led, and that's a company called Axis. And Axis really is an aggregator. Everyone familiar with the Bloomberg terminal? We're at the Bloomberg conference. I know they're not related anymore, but if you think of the Bloomberg terminal and what that did for finance, Axis was solving the same issue for corporates dealing with governments. So today, we're sitting in a world very different to 50 years ago. Today's world, there are many corporates that are larger than some economies, some GDPs, some governments, many corporates that are international and deal in 10, 20, 50, 100 countries. Many of them are not that large, but still deal across 10 or 20 jurisdictions. How do these corporates keep up with the changes in regulation and government that affect them in all these different countries in an effective manner? When you try to solve that problem, that is a very complex situation. When AI advented the way it did over the last 18 months and really had those advances, what Axis could do was very quickly become AI-led. Now, why do these companies stand a better chance of being the first LLM in Arabic and healthcare that actually has a real market, or the first company like Axis solving for that using AI, than a company that wakes up tomorrow, or a founder that wakes up tomorrow and says, hey, I'm going to build a company doing this? Because companies that already exist but are super agile are able to say, I have customers, I have brand, I know the problem these customers need solved, not let me find product market fit. Now, how can I use this newest and latest, greatest technology to make my product that much better and become AI, or to completely reinvent my product? But they don't have the 30 years of legacy infrastructure. So what we're looking at as investors is companies that have really solved product market fit, but are yet small enough, agile enough, and the technology is new enough where they're able to say, hey, let me shift really quickly, and let me become AI-led, and let me build something 10 times better in a fraction of the cost. I already have the customers, I know what I'm doing, I have the team. So that's where we're seeing AI come in as a venture investor, rather than, hey, we want to invest in something that 10 years from now may or may not work out.
That's great. So that leads me to very naturally to the next question, because you touched on two very different use cases, which I think are great. So in particular, access to healthcare, I think, is an interesting problem to think about. There is a lot of hype about this topic in the news, and people who really ought to know better are shouting about, job displacement and existential risk and, human-level intelligence and super intelligent AIs and all this other kind of stuff, right? But what are some of the other real use cases in the industry, right, that people perhaps are not thinking about, right, or people are not talking about? So, Omid?
So actually, that's a very good question, because mostly people right now are thinking about, okay, what's going to happen, what's going to take on, or what would be the advantage or disadvantage, how would be the risks, and all the capabilities. Currently, there is a lot has been done on almost every vertical of the industry, but very, very targeted to optimization and to some extent predictions as well. So we can actually talk about quite few examples, like as we mentioned in healthcare, not necessarily on the, let's say, providing discoveries, or if we kind of put healthcare to operations, discovery, pharmaceutical, all those different, let's say, aspects. There is a lot already done in actually like optimization of hospitals and how scheduling can be done, how these type of, let's say, demand and need for actually nurses, doctors can be optimized in a way that not everyone is on shift, but there is no basically demand for it. Or people are out and now they need to actually come to shift to just support the emergency that is hitting the hospitals. That's one. The other one is on research environments for pharmaceuticals, how research can be optimized in a way that actually these proposals can go to the right departments and actually get outputs much more quicker, summarized. Or we can talk about oil and gas as well, how actually oil production can be kind of predicted, but not only predicted and estimated, but how then that prediction is going to have an impact on capex of some capex projects, or how can it create capex projects so that actually it can then go to construction or building or infrastructure, how things can actually be interconnected. And this is already done. It's not something that we're going to be imaginary, or like it's not going to be something very futuristic. Or we can talk about industries like security, or I mean in cybersecurity, information security, how things are actually being used to optimize workflows in the world of cyber threats all around, and actually criminals misusing the landscape. There is, to be honest, I can name as many as you want in terms of like different industries, because we sometimes actually get stuck on thinking about what's next rather than actually trying to fix the problems we have at hand. And that is one of the most useful scenarios for current AI capabilities. Of course, it's very generic, but we can limit it. Of course, it is very chaotic and sometimes hallucinate, but we can reduce the hallucination to the levels that are acceptable for that optimization or that product or that operationalization of the environment. So in terms of finance as well. So there are, as much as I go forward, I remember different examples of finance. It can be optimization of balance sheets, market caps, understanding how things can be much more efficiently done before all these demands are coming and hitting the organization's regulatories.
Right. Thank you. So that's great. I think one important aspect of what you said is, a lot of these problems that you're talking about are not the kind of sexy problems that people kind of fixate on, right? It's very mundane stuff, right, which can be tedious, very slow and annoying for people to do, right? And a lot of what we do with AI, for example, at Bloomberg is in the same vein, right? So we have to deal with an enormous amount of unstructured data that we ingest from hundreds of thousands of different sources, right? Making sense of all of this information and making it searchable, discoverable, intelligible to human beings cannot be done with any other technology. And these are not kind of the problems that people normally think about, right? Like, what is this story about, right? Is it about China or Russia? Is it about this person or that person, right? Making kind of interfaces to accelerate people's workflows and things like that. But Noor, maybe you can add something to this, right? So what are, from your perspective as a VC, maybe one or two the most exciting examples that you can think of, right, like in the last couple of years?
So when we take a look at investing, we take a look at the Middle East and Africa as an investment firm. This part of the world is 1.9 billion people, half are under the age of 30. Infrastructure or legacy infrastructure doesn't exist in many sectors. So, 6 years ago, we were 85% unbanked. Now we're about 50% unbanked. Nobody built banks. We built fintechs. To the extent that AI can enable those fintechs, that's great. You take a look at healthcare access. No one's going to build hospitals to fix that. No one's going to graduate enough surgeons or doctors. The question is, how do we use AI? So my job is to sit sometimes and think about, which industries 5 years from now are massively different to 5 years ago. In 2018, when we took the bet on fintech, the bet was that by 2023, today, fintech looks nothing like 2013, right? We couldn't have imagined in 2013 where fintech would be today, right? And this acceleration and adoption of technology is only going to happen faster with AI. In 2020, when we took the bet on health tech, the bet was that by 2025, so next year, your data management, your personalized medicine, all of that will look nothing like 2015. You couldn't have even imagined it. And today, where we sit in 2024, and we say 5 years from now, what is so drastically different to 5 years ago? Right? What are the sectors that are at those inflection points? Where does macro and geopolitics meet seed-level founders, and they're colliding into each other at Series A, which makes it fantastic for us. And guess what? They're also using AI. So they can even accelerate that accelerated growth even more. So we sit and we think about this part of the world. And this part of the world has an unreplicable asset. The largest asset we have here is our youth. Half the population is under 30. They are growing, they are eager, they want to do things, they want to build companies. And if they're going to build companies that matter, they're going to take a look at which industries. So we come in and we say, great, 5 years from now, 5 years ago. And we come down right now to two industries that are fundamentally at their inflection points. The first is supply chain technology. Anything manufacturing and shipping. In 2029, we will look back at 2019 and say, we can't believe we did that. And what we're seeing today, using AI and other things, are all the way from additive manufacturing. So what are the softwares enabling the digitization of parts and spare parts across oil and gas, across maritime? What are those softwares that are identifying what needs to be produced, not let's produce $2.7 billion of spare parts and keep it in a warehouse? And how are we shipping them? Why are we still using raw commodities to produce things in China and ship them to the region and keep them in a warehouse for 6 years before throwing them away? Is that anyone's best use of working capital? And how can we predict using AI what we're going to need? And then how can we build the software to manufacture that locally using 3D printing? And what's the material science behind that, using all the data that you can leverage and using AI to identify the best material science for the best spare parts? So you start to think about that as one industry where we're not even going to recognize it. This part of the world, about 3% of our GDP is in manufacturing. The targets are to get that to 7, 8, 9, 10%, depending on the country, in 7 years. No one's going to build manufacturing of the 90s style. We're going to build today's manufacturing, the best in the world technologies for here. And then we take a look at the rest of supply chains, so drone logistics, picking up in this part of the world more than anywhere else in the US or Europe. Not last mile, forget last mile, but mid-mile. Why would you ever ship things from a port to a warehouse or a warehouse to a warehouse in emerging markets using old roads that barely function, trucks that operate on diesel? So when we take a look at emerging markets, the drones can do this. Now, what are the softwares enabling those drones? What's the pathing route? Which drones? Abu Dhabi gave a 350-kilo payload license 6 months ago for commercial drone deliveries. So you think about that and you think, we're leapfrogging. Right? So supply chain is one. The other industry that we take a look at, we're like, there's no way that in 2029, this is going to be done the same way as 2019, therefore today we're at inflection point, is food security. The way we feed people, especially in emerging markets. 5 years ago, vertical farming was proof of concept and loss-making, mostly. Today, it's commercial. We all see food produced by the vertical farms in the region in our supermarkets here. 5 years from now, not only will it be commercial and profitable as it is today, but the variety of foods that we can produce in a manner that is sustainable using these vertical farms will be tremendous. So we take a look and we say, okay, again, material science, AI, so we've invested in a company called, well, now it's called Iris, it used to be called Red Sea, that reduces energy consumption for vertical farming by 95% because of a membrane they created out of cowst. Again, this part of the world taking a look at how do we solve these dire problems. Now, they are retrofitting farms in 6 different countries across Europe and in the US. It's simply the best technology out there for vertical farming to reduce energy consumption. So you start to think about which industries are the ones where they really matter, we have a dire need, this incredible population that we have needs them for their future, and we can leverage AI to actually build stuff that's better than anywhere else in the world.
I think that's an incredible lead to my next question. So, people have been fixating way too much on this kind of shiny stuff with chatbots and, we have all this stuff, but the real use cases, right, that both of you are talking about are nothing like that, right? And the limitations and failure modes of these large language models are simply not relevant to these kinds of use cases, right? Because they frankly don't have anything to do with language. We don't need to worry about hallucinations, right, or veracity of output or something like that when we're doing optimization or talking about the supply chain kind of planning and stuff like that. So now, in light of all of this, of the actual real use cases that we are focusing on, right, solving, as you put it, dire problems in key industries, right? What can we say about responsible AI, right? So, what does responsible AI actually mean in this context? And maybe start with you, since
I brought us onto this. I think, our perspective as investors, beyond the ESG and all the environmental stuff that we look at, when the firm started 6 years ago, we aligned with 5 of the UN SDGs, right? And we said, we're going to be venture investors, and it's about returning money with wonderful returns to our fantastic LPs, because if we do that well, then they'll give us more capital, and we can back more founders, and we can do that all over again. And so as a result, our first fund, which was a 2018 $50 million fund, has returned a 0.7 DPI, which puts it in the top decile financial performers globally, and, right? And we're very, very lucky, very fortunate. We haven't sold the winners. We've done top quartile performance so far in Fund 2. We're working on getting it to top decile. We managed to raise a full fund in the last year of our Fund 3, which we're soon closing. So we're doing well by financial standards. However, we always had this afterthought. And the afterthought we've been documenting now for 6 years. And so the first SDG we aligned with was financial inclusion. So our portfolio has financially included 64 million people. It has given access to healthcare to 7 million people, including over 100,000 virtual surgeries. We have given access to tertiary education to, I think it was about 400,000 people. The portfolio using C-suites or founders is 30% female. And most notably in this part of the world, the portfolio has created almost 12,000 jobs, high-quality jobs. So we've always thought about venture investing as we need to create financial returns by investing in mission-driven founders. And when we invest in mission-driven founders, it's not just an element of ESG box checking, it's why are you starting this company? Do you genuinely care about solving this problem? And then over and above that, are you going to solve this problem in a way that makes the world a better place or a side effect with a worse place? So when we think about implementing AI responsibly, you can't hold a founder accountable for every single side effect that you can't foresee. But you can say, I want to solve access to healthcare and first point of healthcare. And we will attempt that 100% of those are positive interactions or positive results. But if 2% are negative and 98% are positive, and of those 98 other people, half would have never had access to healthcare, is that a worthwhile trade-off? That is not something that a machine, no matter how smart the AI is, can answer. That is something that is a human conclusion. That is this founder out to solve a mission that matters in a way that overall has a positive impact on humanity? And that's where responsible AI comes in, because no form of box checking on ESG will give you a mission-driven founder, and no form of box checking on responsibility will give you a human-focused founder.
Wonderful. So I guess, there is no substitute to careful thought, is what I'm hearing, right?
Absolutely.
So, it's not enough to, check a box, right, that says that you followed in some sort of internal governance, procedure or whatever. Like, you actually need to consider what is the real outcome and impact on the world, whether or not you're using AI, right? This, I think, to summarize what you said. But what is your perspective? How do you guys think about this at Palantir, given that you touch a lot of useful, interesting stuff?
Of course, and actually, I'm going to double down on the mission aspect. And we have been a very mission-driven, let's say, company, and a bunch of geeks, actually, like all software engineers, all people who love to write code and think about the impact, what they've done, actually. So I'm going to share an experience, actually, that we've been through, considering our line of work and the verticals we operated. So we actually realized that, and to add to your point, that just a check in the box is not going to fix it. So in our engineering mindset of how we operate, we were like, okay, how can we actually make sure the policies, laws, regulations, and these type of governance side, how it can be applied to technology. So since 2010, actually, we created a group, a team of engineers inside the company called Civil Liberty, PCL, basically, Privacy and Civil Liberties. And from that team, everything actually is deployed at the product level, and we look at it at the technology level and see how we can actually implement these type of governance around the technology by creating tools inside it, so that when a customer or an organization wants to use that type of capability, that there is a line that might be crossed, how can that be controlled technologically, rather than just audit coming in, checking, making sure we did the right thing or the customer did the right thing and move to the next stage. So we've been doing this since 2010. And you'd be surprised that actually we've seen organizations, as in regulators, they actually adapted our way of working in this line and started putting it inside RFPs or RFIs that actually are being sent out or received by them. And they are looking at it much more like an aspect of part of the solution rather than just being something as a check in the box. That's one side of it. The other side is we are seeing much more technology becoming, if we want to be very, let's say, blunt about some points of it, sometimes we realize we got dependent on the technology. So, and these type of regulations make sure that we can run without it sometimes. So for example, if you are suddenly your computers are completely down, your network is down, then you can't operate in a business. So, and some of these actually, like responsible side, make sure that the business runs, the impact on human, look at the hospitals, can continue running. And I think with this evolution of responsible and also AI as the background, we are going to see a turn from we depending on technology to technology becoming our servant rather than actually just dependent. So to ask it to do what we want. So if we want to see what can responsible AI be in future, it's actually what we're going to ask it, or what are going to be the requirements of this topic. So if it is going to be requirements gathering on data only, that's going to have problems, because then not necessarily the AI agent or technology or tool or chat that you're going to build is not going to be doing exactly what you're asking it, because you fed the wrong data, and it's not just the data, it's actually what is necessary for the AI machine or the basically learning scheme to pick from it. So I think this is where we kind of started to put down a very strong stance since then, because we saw the challenges. We saw different activities, government, commercial organizations trying to do activities with their data, which are sometimes not necessarily good. And they need to have boundaries on it to actually control it. And we looked at it from an engineering point of view, and we noticed that it is getting adapted to the regulatories and other environments which are much more, we can say, law enforcement or audit policies of within organization, finance, hospitals, and it's actually a very interesting trend that we saw.
Startling parallels, because we have a very similar internal function like a too, right? So, and that is also kind of an approach that had been very well received by our regulatory partners, and I think this has been great. Any parting thoughts, since we are 1 minute over time? So let's thank our sponsors, the QRDI Council, for sponsoring this session and helping move these important conversations forward. Anything you want to say in conclusion?
I think personally I am very excited because we've been seeing the transformation or evolution of technology from a very interesting analog time, and we moved to digital. We saw CDs appeared and disappeared for a few years, and we then went to storage, and the whole evolution now coming to AI. I think this is where I echo the word that basically we're going to see what we're asking for it. And we're not actually going to stop on this specific technology that is enabling. And what we're going to be worried about is actually limited to the requirements that we're defining and also what we're going to ask from it. And it's going to get much more specialized, definitely, because right now the topic is very general. The usage of it is very general. But we're seeing more and more industries actually focusing on specific outputs from it. And that's where it gets very interesting, and that's where it gets actually usable and accountable, because that's the accountability of a specialism coming in. And more regulators actually trying to put a tap on it to say what is right, what is wrong in terms of regulations, not necessarily other aspects.
My parting thoughts? 3 words. Use with caution. I think that's the only thing to say. Thank you very much.